Now we're going to go through and mop up some of the options in the config files that we didn't get in the viewer appearance tutorial last time. So to start out, let's make a copy. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start my server. Okay, and then let's go to Assets and go to the config file. Okay, so I'm just going to start it from the bottom, and, well, I'll have to bounce around a little bit, but mostly start from the bottom and work my way up. So, the very bottom bit, you have the debug options. So, when you send the viewer out to other computers, you don't know what kind of graphics card they have. So sometimes your images will have to be divided up to fit in the GPU. So to make sure, that they work well when they're divided up, you can kind of fake a GPU that supports smaller texture sizes. So 1024 is, probably as small as you're going to encounter. So let's turn fake GPU on and set the max size to 1024. Okay, obviously it should still work fine as expected. We can see if we open up the console that it does divide up our slides. We get this little warning saying, that it was divided up. You can also call viewer get, is it texture? Yeah, texture info. And it will print out this little string saying it had to divide up file 1 because the GPU max size on this computer is 1024, like we had set it. And then this is the texture size that it was able to use. So its size has to be evenly divisible by the slices that it can put in it. So in this case, 1024 is evenly divisible because our slides were 512. It had to use 11 textures. And so this might be useful information for you to send back to yourself in case you ever have a problem with a viewer. If somebody reports the problem, you can just, check this information and see if maybe, the resizing could have had something to do with it. Okay, resize. Let's see, there is another thing we can check here. Let's say that our slices are still too big to fit, in the GPU. So it's like now it doesn't just say it's dividing up, it says it's dividing up and scaling them because it has to actually scale them smaller to 500 to fit, in the GPU. So those are pretty much the two options. The third option is, of course, that nothing happens and it fits your images in the GPU without having to divide them up at all. That's always preferred. But this allows you to test weaker systems, without actually having a weaker system. So let's set that back to false. Okay, let's see. So before I refresh, that quick keys was on. So basically that means we can press the M button and we can scroll through all of our available images. So if you don't quite have, your experiment laid out to go through the images that you put in the viewer, but you want to test them, you can just use M to cycle around. Obviously, always turn that off before publishing your study because, you don't want the user to accidentally press the M key and then have their trials out of sync. Okay, so let's see. So we'll leave that on now because we are debugging. Next, we'll mess with the controls. So for that, actually, I'm going to go back into the tutorial from last time. So actually, let me close this out. Okay, in the appearance one, where I had stuck in a really, really large set of slides, and this would be something you might want to fiddle with if you do have really thin slices on your CT scans. So let's go to Assets, Config. Okay, so if you remember, This one, like you drag it forever, and it just doesn't move that fast. So you can change your drag distance here. So this is how many pixels you have to drag before it advances one slide. And it's worth mentioning every pixel measurement is in relation to the width and height that you've specified up here. So if my width is not 800, and I guarantee you it's not, right? Viewer get width, it's 599. So to fit the viewer in, it had to scale the size down. So that means that every one of these values, has been scaled with this. So this is, sort of a percentage of this. So this is 25 pixels if it's actually 800. But anyway, so let's set the drag distance to 5. And now, that's actually a different one. Let's go to, this one. We can see we're dragging a lot faster. Okay, and we can do something similar with the keys. Like you can see, if we hold down the key, it just trudges along. So hold time can be set. This can either be set in milliseconds or seconds. Right now it's using seconds. But for example, if I were to type 50, that's the exact same value because now it knows it's in milliseconds. But yeah, let's set this to probably 10, I bet. And so this is 10 milliseconds to hold down the key. Every 10 milliseconds, it will advance the slide. So refresh. Okay, and much faster. That's a lot nicer, right? Okay. And then you basically just have these little true and false values for turning on and off. So if you don't want them to navigate with dragging, you just set that to false. If you don't want them to navigate with WASD, set that to false. And that might be something you actually might really want to do. If you have text boxes that they'll be typing in, you might want them to be able to type the letter W or the letter S without it scrolling the viewer. Right now, I actually have, let's see, so, I can type W, I can type S, and then when I leave that text box, I can use W and S to scroll. But that is extra work, and, you can just disable it, and nobody will probably miss, the WASD feature. And then, you can turn off arrows. That's the arrow keys, so, that wouldn't allow no keyboard input. And so right now, the only input we would allow is with the scroll wheel. Okay, so we can see I can scroll with the scroll wheel, but nothing with the keyboard, nothing by dragging. Oh, actually, when you disable dragging, it no longer checks to see if you dragged to try and differentiate between a drag and a click because, there shouldn't be any difference, so dragging still clicks. Okay. Let's see, so let's turn these back on, though, because, of course, these two options, so the scroll sensitivity is a multiplier, so if I want to, make my scroll 5 times more sensitive, then I can just put a 5 in there. And then the limit is how much I'm actually allowed, how much the scroll wheel, the operating system, can actually tell the viewer to scroll any one time. Some computers will just give outrageously large numbers. Most just use 1. But we have had some laptops with trackpads that just, I don't know, scrolled so fast in the viewer. And so capping them at 1 wasn't the worst thing. But, you can always put in a high value if you don't want it to be capped. And then let's refresh that. Go. And we can see we got this much faster scroll wheel because we've increased the sensitivity. If you scroll on your trackpad and you notice a lot of momentum that, like when you lit it up, it just keeps on kind of scrolling, then you have one of those computers that that seems to just give it an obscene value. I don't know how. I don't know why it happens. But anyway, and then, same way as with the other ones, you can turn off the wheel if you don't want the user to scroll with the wheel. Okay, so log scrolling. So I can right now type viewer get scroll times 4, and I am on the first image. So 1, and then I am specifying how I want my log to be formatted. So I'm going to have each scroll, the components of each scroll separated by a comma, and then, each scroll itself separated by a new line. So I can hit enter, and you see like this big long line. It's basically telling me what slide I was on, what time in milliseconds, and how I got there. So this means I drug the mouse, So let's see, I can use the wheel, I can use drag, I can use keyboard, and now I can get my scrolls again, and you see K for keyboard, D for drag, W for wheel, However, actually, let's see, if I move to the next trial, I just got here, so let's get the scroll times for that. So that's the third one. And you can see this focus event, or F for focus. So basically, I focused on it, I haven't actually scrolled at all. So the scroll log is always populated with something if they've actually viewed the image. But if you don't intend on logging scrolls, you can just set that to false. And, now any scrolls you do, even the focus, like it doesn't matter. It's always going to give you an empty string. Okay. Let's see. Okay, now we're in the click section. We covered a lot of this in the appearance tutorial, so I'm not going to mess with most of it here, but we can look at this overwrite last-click. If I click, then I can write viewer get last click, and it's like, well, here's your last click. It gives me the X, the Y, the slide, the slice, and the time that it was clicked. Notice it's 31:7:19. If I click again and then ask for the click again, it will just give me that same click again because I haven't told it that I've addressed that last click. But I can viewer reset last click, and now it says my last click was 000. I can look again after clicking get last click, and you'll notice it's no longer 31:7:19, it's now a different click. So this is if you want to only look at one click at a time and then ignore all clicks after until you yourself have reset the click to make it okay to get new clicks. If you set this to true, then you don't have to reset the click in order to see clicks again. So for example, I can click here, get last click, so 54:26, get last click, 97:38. So it's always, every new click is updating, or is overwriting the the last click. Okay, let's see. Whoops, this one. Okay, and I covered all of those values in the appearance tutorial. Remember that any of these pixel values are in relation to the width and height. So if this gets scaled, these get scaled. Depth obviously doesn't get scaled because depth is in slices and it never gets scaled. So same for the bar width and bar border. Let's see. I will retouch on colors a little bit. So let's see. We have this FFF4. This would be the same as FF. Well, actually, I don't know. Let's see. What would be 4? 4 would be a quarter. No, I'm not doing that math. There we go. Those two are the same. You know, if I add full opacity, you know, I can add full opacity. That's also the same. You know, again, if you remove the alpha channel, that's the same as telling it you have full opacity. But yeah, just remember it's red, green, blue, alpha, or red, green, blue, alpha. You know. Okay, let's see. So this width and height up here, we haven't messed with that yet. This does almost nothing right now. We have in viewer events, let me remove that one, that's an old one. So let's go to, actually, I want to change, I don't need my, my big slice count, my thin slices anymore. I'm going to move back to the other image because it loads faster. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, so width and height. This doesn't do anything with the way that the image, the CT viewer is set up right now, because we have in viewer events, we have this function, viewer stats width. And basically what this does is when the CT viewer loads, it says how wide should I be? And if you've provided this method, then you can tell it how wide to be. So this actually looks at the width of a user's window, and then it gives them a width based on that. And so if I change, you know, this to 512 or something, you know, it doesn't really matter because I was wrong. Okay, yeah, it doesn't matter as far as the viewer size goes, but you may have noticed this bar gets a little thicker, and that is because every dimension you specify in here is in relation to these width and height. So now, you know, instead of 10 pixels if it's 800, it's 10 pixels if it's 512. So yeah, so it is technically a little bit bigger now. But yeah, but as far as the actual image goes, this is unused. This is mostly used when I get my last click, like you noticed. Oh, let's actually click, I guess. Okay, so if I get my last click, these dimensions are in accordance to my config file. This has nothing to do with the pixels on my screen, because this is going to vary, you know, across every single screen, you know, all over the world. So basically, when you write, when you change these values, just think about what kind of resolution you want to be giving and receiving coordinates in, and, you know, that's what you specify here. If you don't use this function, then this is going to look a little weird, because this whole, like the questions on one side and the viewer on the other side, it's all expecting the viewer to be, you know, sized accurately for this window, which will no longer be the case. So let's see. So in our config, we have the height set to 800 and the width set to 800. So now we are not giving it a new height and width when it loads. The height will be, you know, 800, period. So let's see. So viewer get width. Okay, so our browser said, you know, you have 599 pixels to use, you know, please use those. And so that's what it did. But if we reload now that we don't have that function, skip to the viewer, you know, it's huge and sized funny, you know, because again, this was designed specifically. But we can get width, and it is, of course, 800 exactly. Viewer get width inches, you know, and we can get the physical inches it is on the screen. that's okay, I guess. Something else we can do, this is a different resizing option, is let's say you want the viewer to be the same inches on every single screen. So you can fake the density. So let's set this to true. And you see this comment here, if fake density 160 pixels is 1 inch. So our 800 by 800 is going to be 5 inches. So on every single screen, barring some hardware issue or something, the viewer will be 5 inches. So let's refresh the viewer page. And I mean, I can pull out a tape measure, but you wouldn't be able to see. Trust me, this is 5 inches. And then, you know, we can get our width again. And so 5 inches is apparently 480 pixels on my screen. We can get the inches, and of course it's 5. This get inches is actually a good function to use if you want to make sure that people can see certain things in your image, like maybe, you know, this cancer doesn't show up well or something, if the screen size is less than a certain inch count. So you can always send this back in your data that they're, you know, that you're sending back to the server, and just say if it's less than 4 inches, I'm throwing it out or something. Let's see. Something not to do, or it would be meaningless, is to tell it to fake the density and also provide a viewer width. So if I do that, it'll actually yell at you. So basically, it's just going to look at the custom width. It's going to totally ignore pixel density. Because, you know, that's meaningless, right? It's like I'm providing it a custom width and also saying, you know, use density independent pixels. That I can't think of any reason for that, or how I would, you know, define the behavior in that situation. So yeah, so never use this function and have fake density set to true. It's meaningless. Skip yield for now. We're going to use the larger slice count for that. And let's do overscan. So overscan, you know, it's like your TV, for example. I set it to 50 pixels, and so, what's going on? Somebody, wait, is that, let me turn this back on so it doesn't look horrible. Much better. Okay, and you can see I've kind of cropped off on each side 50 pixels equivalent. You know, so this is if you need to overscan images at all. Hopefully you don't. I don't know why you'd need to do that, but it's there if you need it. Okay, let's see. Fake density. Yeah, okay. Now we're going to move to the other one. Okay, so this yield time. You might notice when you first load, the images have to be, if you watch it really slowly, you'll see something pop up on the side here. But the images have to be turned into, well, images that can go in the GPU. This can be, you know, depending on the size of your image, this can take a long time. And to keep JavaScript from saying that a script is not responding, basically we yield control back to the browser at, you know, around 500 milliseconds. You know, it's not exactly 500, but, you know, basically it goes 500 and then it finishes its next task and returns control. So if we fake the GPU, true. Okay, and we set it to 512, then it's going to have to chop that really large image up. Okay, so let's do okay, so you know, you can watch over here and you can see percentages, and you know, it takes a little while. It doesn't actually take that long, but if you have several of these large images, you know, conceivably it could take a reasonable amount of time, and the browser might start to worry. I know Firefox by default seems to wait about 10 seconds before it starts to worry, but, you know. So basically, when we yield, we are also giving that little update. So that little text you saw over here with the percentage, it gives that update with the yield time as well. So if we set it to 100, we will see more of these little updates. But it will also take longer because it takes a little bit of a time for it to just stop yield control, get it back, and then start working again. So, generally, I don't know, I feel like half a second was good for yield time. There it goes. Okay, yeah. So obviously, waiting that long wouldn't be great. But yeah, so half a second was fine. Oh, downscale. Generally, you will never use downscale because, as we showed earlier, we downscale, when it's necessary to do that anyway. But if there is ever a conceivable time, let's go to the fast one again. Okay, so let's fake the GPU again. And let's set it to 1024. Okay. Oops, let's start up the server. Localhost. Okay, so rather than splitting up the images across a bunch of textures that would fit in the GPU, it just downscaled the whole thing into something that would fit in one texture on the GPU. Generally, I don't know why you would ever need to do that, but it's there in case you do. Okay, so that's all for the config.ini file. Let's see. If we were to go to assets and slide dim. Okay, so this one, this basically tells the viewer how each slide should be configured. So for example, you have the set number, so you'd have 1 through 20. Right now, we're only using sets 1 and 3. You can skip numbers, just don't reuse them. The next number in line is the file number. So this is saying set 1 uses file 1, set 3 uses file 3, set 4 also uses file 3. So this will allow you to reuse file 3, across multiple sets, without having to re-download and reprocess a new file. So if we go into slides, we can see what this looks like, right? This is slide 1 and, file 1, file 3. The next one is saying that file 1 is divided up, 7 slides wide, 6 slides tall. File 3, 8 slides wide, 8 slides tall. And then this is how many slides total it has. So this doesn't have to be 8 times 8, it just happens to be 8 times 8 in this situation. If you saw in the appearance video, we did actually change this to be a number that wasn't these two multiplied together. It's just a coincidence that all my numbers are their dimensions multiplied by together. This other one is a T or an F. Basically, whether or not clicks can happen on that slide. So for example, 3 is true, so we can click it. Then if we go to the next one, we can't click that. Okay, and then this last one is what format it has. Notice the dot is also included as well. So these are all JPEGs, so JPEGs. You could type PNG here if it's PNG, but it's not. Don't save. Okay, and then another config file would be this shapes config file. So you can add a shape. So this will be the shape name, R. It's a good name. And then let's make the width of let's say it's going to be a circle. So the width will be 500. These are also in the dimensions that you specify in the config file. Okay, depth. No, sorry, height. Height. Well, the circle doesn't matter. I don't even have to specify. It won't even look at the height, but circles are the same width and height. Let's see, depth. I don't know. Let's go with 20. Why not? And then let's see, whether or not to fade the image out. So we'll do one of each actually. So this one will. So let's do a RF. This one will fade. And it will be, I don't know, magenta, I guess. With, 50%, let's do 75% opacity. No. 25. 25 will be good. Okay. Then let's do the same thing. Except we'll make it green. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. And definitely don't have two things with the same name. That's silly. So this would be not fading. So it'll just be solid the whole time. Okay. So something to point out, I pointed out in appearance, but I'll point it out here. Square is referring to the angles, not the actual shape. So you can have a square with different width and height, and it'll be a rectangle. Okay, so we're saving that. And let's see, let's go to reload. Yes, please resize the viewer. Oh. I used the wrong number of elements in my file, so it yelled at me. Let's see, so we got, yep, I am missing my weight, which is the thickness if it's a ring, but, it's, it's a circle, so the weight can be whatever you want. But it is important that it's there just to fit the format. So, my bad. Okay. Oop. Much better. Okay, so let's skip to the viewer. And let's create that. Okay, so there we go. That one scrolls. And then let's create another one. By 600. Okay, and then this one will not be the fading one. So there we go. So now we see, this one just kind of pops in and out, and this one kind of fades in and out. So that's the difference between those. Okay, and that's about all the config stuff.